Back, Director Aaron Katz. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a couple questions and then we'll open it up to the audience because I'm sure they have things they want to discuss with you. I know in your intro you mentioned LA, and location tends to be pretty central to your films, you know, like Portland, Iceland, and in here Los Angeles. So I was wondering if you could talk about, you know, what drew you to this kind of unique take on an LA noir.
Yeah, well, living in Los Angeles, I moved to Los Angeles about 5 years ago now, and about 3 years ago, at the time I had written the film, and I wasn't sure that I would like Los Angeles when I moved here. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and had lots of wrong ideas about the city, and lived in New York, and eventually came here, and yeah, I didn't know what I would find, and I grew to love the city over the period of time of living here, and really wanted to make a film that not only represented the city, but lived in a tradition of great movies about the city, especially great thrillers about the city, which I think often use location the best. I don't know why that is, but I feel like sometimes thrillers, like I'm thinking of a film called Nick of Time, which uses like some really great downtown locations, or Curtis Hanson's Bad Influence, which was a big favorite of mine. So I really wanted to live in that tradition, but also wanted to express a different look at the city and have these characters really span the city and have Jill and Heather find themselves in many different sides of Los Angeles.
You mentioned Jill and Heather, and I think Lola Kirk and Zoe Kravitz have this sort of terrific chemistry on screen. Like they have a very natural rapport. Can you talk about, you know, how they developed that kind of? It just seems like an easy friendship between them, and yet there's a lot going on in the friendship too.
Yeah, well, we all spent a lot of time together before shooting the movie, both rehearsing and also just getting to know and trust each other and talking about the characters. It's fortunate that Lola lives here and Zoe was shooting Big Little Lies. And so we had an opportunity to just spend a lot of time and talk about these characters. And the characters, as they were in the script, you know, I shared like a really early draft with Lola before we knew she was going to do the movie, and fortunately she really responded to the script. But part of the reason I wanted to show her an early draft was I wanted her and eventually Zoe to have a lot of authorship over these characters and really make them their own. So, you know, what's on screen is, you know, they're, I think, inhabiting characters that they created, and it was actually Lola's suggestion you cast Zoe. We were sitting around talking about who to cast in that role, and she said, "What about Zoe?" And I said, "That's a great idea. Let's try to do that."
Cold Weather, it's a generally female-led mystery, and here we've got another sort of female-led mystery. I mean, what draws you to that kind of terrain?
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, it was the characters. I just liked these characters, but maybe on a subconscious level, you know, we've seen men do these things a lot, and we've seen women not do them very much, and so I think I'm drawn to stories that look at a different side of something that we're pretty familiar with, especially from the original wave of film noir, which I love, but it's like, it really is all men.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to the audience.
About the writing, you just kind of got into it now, but so many elements of the film are definitely very standard, well within the genre. I guess the only departure might be, you know, a female-dominated cast, which isn't necessarily totally outside of the genre, but how conscious was that in your process? How much did you like really study noir as a genre and then try to maybe, you know, go outside, or how much were you trying to just be straight ahead noir?
Yeah, so I really wanted to live within the noir conventions to some extent, and I think those kinds of films, and maybe even more, those kinds of books are really exciting. I would say in terms of the story I wanted to tell, it was maybe even more inspired by Ross MacDonald and James N. Cain and Raymond Chandler and people like that. And so, yeah, I really wanted to honor that, and at the same time within that find characters who were really different, not just because they're women, but because we see people in ways that I feel like we don't usually get to spend time with them in that way in a noir context.
Are there other questions? Let's see.
This one's back.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Yeah, we
blinded
can't
by the
see- we
lights.
can't see
Yes,
anything.
yes, please.
So you mentioned some authors. What about like specific works? Were there particular things you were drawing on? I mean, Laura on like the sort of doubling thing is very common. Are there like particular movies or books that were particularly influential?
I don't know. I mean, there were a lot. I'm not sure if there were. I mean, one author who was very influential was an author called John Dixon Carr, who's a sort of a golden age of crime writing. He's American, but wrote mostly in England, and his books are. He writes locked room mysteries with sort of impossible solutions. So I really love his writing and wanted to be inspired by that and find a way to. Just kind of continue that tradition, and I think it's interesting that Murder on the Orient Express is also out right now, which I don't want to spoil the ending, but it has a very interesting ending, which is the opposite of this ending in some ways. Agatha Christie is another a big inspiration. Actually, since we're talking about how dominated this world is by men, male protagonists, I think it's interesting that a lot of the golden age of crime writing, I mentioned a bunch of American writers, Ross MacDonald's and Raymond Chandler's of the world, but many of the British writers were women, Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers and Niall Marsh, and like the four queens of crime and really the foundations of crime fiction as we know it are all written by women, even though most of them have largely male protagonists, maybe except for Miss Marple.